It is true that uh, I've lost my coffee. I'm going to retrieve my coffee. I have coffee in sight. I'm returning to camera. Uh, yeah, it's true. I sometimes feel like, Doctor Doom or whatever his name was, the Austin Powers character. Not that I'm supporting or in any way appreciative of Michael Myers, because I'm not, and that's an editorial. Sorry, but as a half Canadian, I'm very disappointed in him. Um, he's had some dramatic roles that are okay. I appreciate that, but his character, his real life person, doesn't seem to be uh, what I would appreciate. Okay, so that said, but I do feel like that character, uh, the large version of the mini me, whatever his name is. Sometime when I spin around in this chair, that's what I feel like. So I know it's odd, but it's what I feel like. Anyway, what we're looking at here is me going through the inventory for World War II, and after working in the smaller scales, at least for the Hex Command NOVA, and then coming back to World War II in 172 scale, it's a remarkable difference. The old school uh, way of doing war games, uh, is what 172 is. 172 scale or 22 millimeter is uh, a larger format skirmish. You couldn't possibly have a battle of so many units unless the table was very large. And in situations like this, when we have a table that's not large, the skirmish becomes literally a skirmish. Just a few things on the game table duking it out for an objective. And what we're looking at here is some of the figures and the vehicles and so on. As you know, one of my favorites is the Cromwell, and we see a Cromwell here with the OOB cards for the Germans and the Americans. Now, I don't know if they match, but I'm going to find out because that's what we're doing inventory for. To find out what's going on. Uh, why is this a issue at all? Because the collection is massive. This collection has been in the works since I left Canada. I would say 1985. But back in the old days, when I was living in Toronto, the old school war gamers, a lot of them Irish, British, and such, that I knew in Brampton, Ontario, at the library there. This is 1970s. We were all into very complicated, very long games because that's the way things were done back then. And I do not have anything from that era in my possession anymore. Um, I can tell you that one of my friends, I won't bother names, but um, his level of detail on his Panzer Grenadiers and especially his Panthers, the tanks and tank commanders, was museum quality and exquisite. It was really hard to see how it would be possible to paint like he did, but he did it, and it was absolutely fantastic to see these on the game table. Now, in those days, you replicated the appearance and location and geography of hedgerows, trees, buildings, fences, and all the other terrain. It wasn't slapped on the game table like a game, it was slapped on the game table like a simulation. Because in those days, in the early 70s, that's what we were doing. We weren't just playing a game, we were playing a simulation. It was serious stuff. And after a while, well, as we grew older, and of course, people started leaving the area and so on, and things started getting simpler, the board game influence started to creep in. And so the Hex Command series is kind of the end result of all those years. It is to be thought of as a board game with miniatures. Every item is on a base, it's a stand, and it represents a group. But in the World War II skirmish, it's 1-to-1. Now, except for the infantry, because we don't really care that much about the exact replication or number of guys in the squad. A stand of infantry is a squad. I don't care if it has 10 men, 100,000 men, doesn't matter. It's a squad. And it's shown on the game table with 3 to 5 guys, 3 to 4. And why? Because the base that they're on, the clear Lexan or acrylic, is really only conducive to 3 characters, 3 models, if you will. And that's why they look the way they do. Now, do we have strict adherence to sizes and scales and everything? Yes, we try to. We had experimented with Plastic Soldier Company's infantry, but they turned out to be larger than the 22 millimeter. They were actually closer to 24, or they were just bulky sculpts. Why does that matter? Well, back when we tested it, we thought they were just too unusual or different from our existing collection, which was Hasegawa. Actually, that's not entirely true. Only in the later year, when we were doing some specific scenarios, did we try to do IMEX World War II. In other words, we had IMEX Americans and Koreans and stuff like that, because we were doing some interesting idea games. But most of the infantry is Eshi, Revell, and so on. Of course, they're plastic. There is not hardly any 20 millimeter metal troops here in this collection. There is, because they couldn't be found otherwise, some 20 millimeter scale anti-tank guns and such. But with 3D printing, all of that is now no longer necessary. With 3D printing, we can now print exactly the things that we don't have. For instance, sometimes mortars are in scale, but they're tiny. The figures are based with a mortar that just looks like a stick. It doesn't look like anything. When we printed our own mortar teams for Hex Command NOVA, the results were extraordinary. You could actually see the mortar. And that was 10 millimeter. Call it 12 millimeter. Doesn't matter. You could actually see the model. And that's the difference. And I don't care how old you are. Oh, Terry, you're old. That's why your eyes are old. You can't see anything. Well, okay. But fix the problem. And the problem is some of these in-scale sculpts should not be in scale. They need to be exaggerated to make sense. For instance, an example would be the machine gun on top of one of our half-tracks that we're looking at here. That's a 50 caliber. Well, was it always a 50 caliber? Sometimes, was it a 30 caliber? Can't really say, but generally it was a 50. But here's the thing. It looks like it's small. It's kind of dinky. And it needs to be a little more exaggerated. So when you look at 3D prints in filament, barrels are never any good. They're always oversized, thick, and such. There's issues. But ideally, what you want to have are barrels that are thick. Why? Because they break if they're plastic injection molded 50 calibers. If you have a metal replacement, you bought it online, say a Sergeant Mess, but that's not exactly big enough either. Still, you can bend those barrels by accidentally, touching them. But in plastic injection molded, like for instance and even in diecast, the half tracks that we're looking at here, you can break those 50 caliber barrels off. And this is another reason why we don't show antennas like our friend in Canada did. He showed it radio antennas and such. It's crazy. It was so highly detailed. But that's why we don't do it, because those kinds of things break off. So essentially what I'm saying is when you get to the point of making a model, eliminate everything you think is going to break as much as you can, or reinforce it. Don't even bother with the antennas. Now, wait a minute. Here's an example. The extra filament that is made during the process of a 3D print, there might be a single line, kind of a thread that you have, that can be used as an antenna. It's true. Is it necessary to do for wargaming? No. For a demonstration game to impress people, like say at a high schooler, and go, wow, look at that, D-Day, wow. You know, he has antennas on the vehicles. Yeah. But generally, normally for wargaming, that kind of detail is, if you want it, fine. But I don't. I used to, but I don't anymore. Don't have time to maintain the repairs. That's true. The repairs on some of these models makes them, you know, it's huge. Anyway, so another thing we're looking at other than the OOB card is the hexagon-shaped tiles for a building. The reason for that is that when you get your troops into a building, you want to be able to, well, maybe not, but you want to be able to show the building's location, and it doesn't matter what the graphic is, and then the troops that are in the building. That's the idea for this. Okay, so back to the scale. As you can see, we are using our generic trees, which are okay. They're working. They're okay size. And the generic buildings are, again, a compromise for, 20 millimeter, 22 millimeter scale. These are not townhomes of, a French village or something, or an Italian village, row houses, and so on, Paris, Parisian. But these are always, and this is what we were thinking about the other day, countryside stuff. So that's what we always seem to be doing, is countryside. And another thing that we don't seem to do because of the space, unless the game table is real big, is you don't see any hills. Because let's imagine this is the top of a hill. That's kind of the way you look at it. This is the hill. And on that, or plateau, and on this is what you're seeing. If you had little undulations in the ground, okay, fine. But do you need to show those? Not really. You should maybe have some kind of compensation for the game, for the scenario, and say, hey, you know what? This area is rolling low ridges that are in the countryside. So your vehicles in the country are one thing, on the road is another, et cetera, et cetera. And when you get into town, okay, it's flat. But otherwise, in the countryside, you could have just said in the scenario notes, it's kind of rough, like undulating. So there you go. And we'll come back with more stuff. And now I got to turn. Yeah.